I want to briefly explain my view of the Nakash in this video and the one that follows when I compare Genesis 3 to Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28. Briefly stated, what I think happened in the garden was that a divine being, not a true member of the animal kingdom, that was associated with the divine council in some way, freely chose to oppose God's plan for humanity by prompting humanity to disobey God so that they would be either killed or removed from God's counsel and family. Of course, I'm assuming a little bit in this video and the next that you understand that Eden is described in ways that are later used for the tabernacle and the temple. It's the dwelling place of God, and where God is, that is where the divine counsel is. That's the consistent Old Testament theological view. God's home is also God's headquarters for running the cosmos, as it were. And it was very common in the ancient Near East to describe the divine dwelling and the divine council headquarters as a lush, luxuriant garden like Eden, or a majestic mountain. The choice for the two options are in a culture that is accustomed to desert living and subsistence living. Surely the gods must live at the best place, the place of the most abundance, where there's never a concern for water or for food or anything like that. Just a perpetual oasis. And that's why the garden imagery was chosen for the divine dwelling. The mountain would appeal to them because it was high to the sky. It was remote from human existence. It wasn't like today where you had people that had equipment and that would be able to scale mountains or even be interested in doing so. Mountains were where the gods lived. They were removed from the normal human habitation. And so both of these images are used to describe the dwelling place of God, the abode of God or the gods of the council. And really it's 6 of one and half a dozen of another. So this is what Eden is about. If you want more on that, you could take the course on Old Testament cosmology. So further, again, I don't believe, again, this was a normal member of the animal kingdom. I think it was a divine being, perhaps masquerading as an animal or taking some sort of serpentine form, who misleads humanity and causes their mortality, their loss of immortality in the garden. My major point, 2 points, are divine being, not a normal member of the animal kingdom. There are a number of things in the narrative that would tell us this is not just an animal, member of the animal kingdom. Talking, the comment about being smarter, than any other. Animals don't have sentience. They don't have calculating brains that they could do math equations or something like that. They have instinct, and they do learn. They have intelligence, but there's no way that you could measure one's intelligence over the other. Of course, to the point of being able to concoct this sort of plan and of course speak. Okay, we clearly are not dealing with a member of the animal kingdom. It's some sort of divine being. So, the word for that being, that figure in the garden, is Nachash. What I think is going on here is a triple entendre. Nakash, as far as the root of the term, the 3 consonants, nun, chet, and shin in the Hebrew word, these 3 consonants are the root of a noun, a verb, and an adjective in Hebrew. If we take Nakash as the noun, pointing to the noun, that would be the word for serpent. And of course, this is how all the translations go. It's perfectly understandable. There's nothing wrong with it. What my view says is what's wrong with it is assuming it's a member of the animal kingdom. So Nachash could be serpent as a noun. Verbally, the verb means to deceive or practice divination, or deception through divination. So Nachash here could speak of or describe or imply a deceiver, or again, some sort of being that had divine knowledge, and of course in the story uses that knowledge to manipulate humanity. Well, again, this certainly fits the story. Now, these two options, many commentators will notice, but somehow they still want to gravitate toward a member of the animal kingdom. I don't understand the thinking behind that, but at least they notice these two items. The third gets neglected. If you're thinking of how this root is used adjectively, or an alternative noun, it means bronzish or bronze, brazen, shining, okay, is the point. Brass shines. That's why it's attractive. So if you take Nachash, and specifically the Hebrew text has ha-Nachash here, it has the definite article, the term would mean the shining one. And I think that needs to be factored into the discussion of Nachash in Genesis 3, because shining or luminosity is a quality that is frequently applied to divine beings in the Hebrew Bible and lots of other places in the ancient Near East. So this is why I say we have a triple entendre going on. We have some sort of being either manifesting as a serpent or a serpentine creature, but it's not a creature, it's not a member of the animal kingdom, it's a divine being who is luminous, shining, and has special divine knowledge and deceives humanity. Again, when I explain it that way, I think you're going to think, well, that sounds kind of normal. Well, and it is. I'm not saying anything that's just really odd or off the beaten path. What I'm trying to get, though, is I'm trying to factor in this luminosity idea, because that is intimately associated with a divine being and not a member of the animal kingdom. This was not a normal member of the animal kingdom. And I would say the fact that it speaks to Eve, the Nachash speaks to her, and she responds, would tell us that we don't even really have a serpent here, but we have some sort of being that could be serpentine. That was the way it appeared to the eye of Adam and Eve. And we see this as well in Isaiah 6 with the seraph, the seraphim. Again, most people assume that it means, see, there it's the opposite. There it's the shining, the blazing, assuming that it comes from the verb to burn. And somehow people forget that seraph is a noun that means serpent as well. And it probably comes, as you'll note from your reading, from seraph, the Egyptian, the idea of a guardian serpent, because this is a throne room guardian. It's the Egyptian equivalent, the Egyptian pictorial iconographic equivalent to the cherub, the cherubim, which were Assyrian or Phoenician throne guardians. That sort of thing. You can't include, let me put it this way, you can't exclude options from Genesis 3 and interpret the passage, and then go to other passages and exclude other options, and then sort of argue that there's no relationship between Genesis 3 and the terminology in Isaiah 6 and the episode in Isaiah 14 and the episode in Ezekiel 28. That's illegitimate methodology. What I'm saying is you need to factor all of these passages in to what's going on so that you get a full, complete, coherent picture of a divine throne room in Eden with a throne guardian, cherub, or serpentine, seraph, guardian, that sort of thing, who, as having proximity to God, having some role in the divine council world there in Eden, decides to deceive humanity to get rid of them. It's as simple as that. And so my method is to incorporate all of the data and put it all in the same pot, as it were, and come out with a conclusion, a coherent conclusion. Not to exclude one element in one passage and then flip it around and include the element that I excluded over in Genesis 3, include it in some other passage, and then it excludes something else. Because that is what commentators do. And it perpetuates a misunderstanding and, frankly, a superstitious view of what's going on in Genesis 3. Now, I'm going to show you some parallels in the next video between Genesis 3, Isaiah 14, and Ezekiel 28 that I think lend validity to a more comprehensive approach with respect to the word meaning and what's going on in Genesis 3. Now, again, what I'm going to show you, you will frequently, in fact, rarely see commentators do. And I don't know why. I don't know what the mental block is, or why the methodological sort of trajectories that they go on. I don't know why they take them, and why they include and exclude information as they go to different passages. I don't know. I can't answer that for you. But I'm going to try to give you a fuller picture, and I've included in the advanced readings something by a scholar whose last name is Van Dyke, and he has written a scholarly work on Ezekiel 28, and I have to credit him with a lot of these observations. That is a dense piece of work. If you don't have Hebrew and have a good knowledge of Hebrew and Semitic languages, you're not going to get that much out of it. But I'm posting it because you can get something out of it, and I've highlighted things in it. And also to let you know, to give you proof, as it were, that Heiser didn't invent this. Okay, I'm not alone here. It's not idiosyncratic. It is fundamentally rooted in the text and in comparative Semitic material and methodology that's consistent across the board. This is the end of this video. This is my second short video on my views of Genesis 3 and the Nakash. If you have not watched the first video on the word Nakash, please do that before viewing this one. So to summarize, building on that previous video, what happened in the garden, again, my view is that a divine being, not an animal, not a member of the animal kingdom, who was associated with the divine council in some way, chose to oppose God's plan for humanity by prompting humanity to disobey God, so they would either be killed or removed from Eden, which was God's council headquarters and, of course, God's abode and his family. Now, I'm going to compare Genesis 3 with Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28. And this comparison, I believe, will bolster what the content that I gave you in the previous video about the meaning of the word Nakash as essentially a serpentine being, again, not a true member of the animal kingdom, who had, again, special knowledge, was lifted up in pride, and basically wanted to run the show, wanted to preempt God's plan and overturn it, substituting what he wanted to be done, which meant getting rid of humanity. And that this being is described also with luminosity, okay, that he was a shining being. There are several indications just in the word Nakash that we're dealing with a divine being. And there are going to be some indications between these three passages that reinforce the point that we are in the divine council setting. We are dealing with a divine council member, not a member of the animal kingdom. So to summarize a little bit here first, so kind of telegraph where I'm going here, lead up to it anyway. Both of these passages, Ezekiel 28, 11 through 19, and Isaiah 14, 12 through 15, are about evil tyrant kings. Okay, one is the king of Babylon, the other one's the king of Tyre, whose pride is described in terms of an ancient story about a divine being who fell from paradise because of rebellion against a higher authority, against God. Now, this tale references Eden directly in Ezekiel's case. Eden is actually mentioned in Ezekiel 28, and indirectly, though I think clearly, in Isaiah's case. First set of comparisons, you'll notice we're comparing these three passages. In Genesis 3 we have the Nachash, which I suggest in the previous video can legitimately point to a shining one, because Nachash is the root, those consonants are the root of an alternative noun to serpent that means brass or bronze, and adjectively it has the quality of shining or luminosity. So I think I translated here shining one just to bring out the point that we're dealing with a divine being, because divine beings are frequently described as luminous, as shining. Okay, Ezekiel 28, we have a being that's described being adorned with precious stones. Now elsewhere, these sorts of jewels that are described in Ezekiel 28 describe the brightness of God's throne. So again, that's an indicator that we're dealing with a divine being, a special being here that has this luminous, brilliant quality. The being is called an anointed cherub, and I made the comment in the last video that cherub in Assyrian and Phoenician, and Ezekiel 28 has a Phoenician context, cherub is a throne guardian. But in Isaiah chapter 6, which we're not going to bring up specifically here, but I mentioned it in the last video, in Isaiah 6, the throne guardian is a seraph, the seraphim, which, yes, on one hand, the term could come from the verb meaning to burn or to blaze, but seraph is another Hebrew noun for serpent. These are serpentine beings, and this is the way the Egyptians, which Isaiah 6 has an Egyptian context to it, these are ways that throne guardians are described with Egyptian imagery, Egyptian iconography. So a seraph and a cherub, seraphim, cherubim, are really the same thing. It's just different terms because of different cultural and religious contexts that are the backdrop to the biblical usage. So Ezekiel 28, we have an anointed cherub. We have a throne guardian. Again, Mashiach is the noun. Mashach is the verb for to anoint. But even that term can come from a Semitic homonym, a word that's spelled the same but means something different. It has a Semitic homonym that means to shine. What a surprise. Okay, so we could actually have a shining cherub here. You can note further, there's a phrase, seal of perfection, in Ezekiel 28. It is Chotem Tachnit. Now, in Semitic, and Van Dyke, that elective, that advanced reading I mentioned in the earlier video, points out that in Semitic, at times the M at the end of a noun is silent, kind of like silent E on a lot of English words. It's called the enclitic mem. If that's the case here, and there are several others that occur in Ezekiel, all right, if that's the case here, then we don't have chotem, which is a signet ring or seal. We have chet vav tav, which means serpent. Okay, it's another word for serpent in Semitic languages. So we actually could translate this, and Van Dyke does, serpent of perfection. In Isaiah 14, our clue that we have the same sort of orientation is Helel ben Shachar in Isaiah 14:12. The term literally means the shining one, son of the dawn. This is the Hebrew term from which we get Lucifer. Lucifer is the Latin Vulgate translation of Hallel, shining, again, something luminous. Lucifer, of course, Latin. We don't, so Lucifer itself doesn't appear in the Bible. You would see it in a Latin translation like the Vulgate, but just so you know where the term comes from. It's a luminous being. So here we go again. Moving on, we have the figure in question in Eden, obviously in Genesis 3. He wants to deceive Adam and Eve, and he tells them, look, when you eat of the tree, you're not going to die. You're going to become like one of the Elohim. And we know that it's plural because in verse 22 of Genesis 3, God says, hey, Adam and Eve have now become like one of us. Again, harkens back to the plural. They become like one of us, like Elohim in that verse. And so it's a very clear reference to the divine council setting that is Eden, okay, or that Eden is. Eden was the place of the council, and snakes, I'm sorry to say, were not members. Okay, animals were not members of the divine council, but divine beings were. And, as we just saw, sometimes those divine beings are described with serpentine imagery because they're throne guardians. Again, serpentine idea, seraphim. So, again, all of this should be sort of transparent, again, to someone who works in Semitic languages. I don't know why so many commentators just sort of don't see the links or refuse to see them. But I refer you to Van Dyke, which is admittedly technical, but again, I'm not making this up. It's not unique to me. Ezekiel 28 specifically references Eden and calls Eden both a garden, like Genesis 3, and a mountain. Again, you get both of the divine counsel, divine abode points of imagery in this chapter. So Eden is the holy mountain of God, and this anointed cherub, or this serpentine figure, walked among the stones of fire. Now, stones of fire in Eden is another indication of cosmic mountain, divine council imagery. You'll see that a little bit clearer in Enoch, which is later, but I would draw your attention to the description of fiery imagery on mountains. Again, stones, mountains are made of stone. That kind of imagery associated with Sinai, which was, again, where God dwelt. Again, these connections, these image connections, are not accidental. They're designed to situate the reader, to transport the reader mentally into the presence of God. So the cherub or serpent figure is, again, on the cosmic mountain in a divine council context, and this figure fancies himself as God, claims to be sitting in the seat of God or the gods, and even says in Ezekiel 28, I am a God, or I am God. Again, I refer to you to Van Dyke for a little bit of discussion there. So you clearly have a figure who's lower level, who considers himself in charge, or ought to be in charge, and that's going to be his downfall. We don't necessarily know how that manifests in Ezekiel 28. In Genesis 3, it manifests by interfering with God's plan, God's will for humanity. Over in Isaiah 14, Helel ben Shakar, the Shining One, is described as wanting to set his throne on the mountain of God, the mountain of the divine assembly. He says, I will set my throne above the stars of El. And we know from passages like Job 38 that the sons of God are described as the stars of God. Again, it's clearly divine council imagery. It's clearly describing a being who wants to usurp authority that does not rightfully belong to him. Genesis 3 continuing, we get the curse, the outcome of the rebellion. The Lord God said unto the Nachash, because you've done this, you're cursed more than all cattle and every created beast, so on and so forth. Upon your belly you shall go, you shall eat dust all the days of your life. Well, serpents don't actually eat dirt. There are critters that live below the ground that are below serpents, so if this is a literal member of the animal kingdom, we have problems there with the curse. We also know that all women, not even all humans and not even all women, fear serpents. We also know that all humans don't die when they're bitten by serpents. Serpents don't all die from head wounds. If you're going to take this literally as pointing to the member of the animal kingdom known as the snake, you have significant interpretive problems. And again, lots of people know about those problems. I would say that this is resolved by looking at it, again, spiritually and metaphorically, letting the imagery of a divine being with a divine council context who wants to vault himself above ordained authority. Let the imagery guide the interpretation of the curse. I would say that the Nakash is cast down to the ground. Keep that in mind, the ground, because in Ezekiel 28, just look over to your right, in Isaiah 14, we have the word Eretz. Okay, ground. Eretz is also Sheol, the underworld. Okay, so I think what's going on in Genesis 3 is God says, look, you wanted to be above everything that is heavenly. I'm going to put you below everything that is heavenly. And in fact, I'm going to put you on the ground where beasts can tread on you. And even more than that, I'm going to put you under the ground in Sheol, okay, the cosmic underworld. You will be beneath every creature because now your domain is the domain of death. This is what Sheol was, the underworld, was the place of the dead. You are now Lord of the dead. You're not going to be head of the council. You're Lord of the dead. And again, this imagery gets played out in other passages later in the Old Testament. Ezekiel 28, again, the point is that this cherub figure is kicked out of the council paradise, the council headquarters, sent to Sheol, sent to Eretz. Again, the term can mean underworld and does in other passages, and you have some references there. Isaiah 14, same thing. Sheol below was astir to greet your coming, rousing for you the Rephaim. The Rephaim, of course, denizens of Sheol in both Ugaritic literature and biblical material here. Again, it talks about how you're fallen from heaven, O shining one, son of the dawn. Verse 15, you're going to be brought down to Sheol, the bottom of the pit. You're cast down to the Eretz. Again, if you look at this and let the imagery drive the interpretation, which is its point, you come out with a very consistent picture of the rebellion of a divine being in all three passages, the result of which is being cast down to the realm of the dead, either the dirt in which people get buried, all right, and that animals walk over, Sheol, the grave, or the cosmic underworld realm of the dead. And this is where, again, the great cosmic enemy is depicted in both Old and New Testament and Second Temple literature. Why? Because God is a God of life and salvation. His opponent is death. And in Genesis 3, this is the result of the fall. Humanity loses immortality, driven out of the garden, away from the presence of God. You shall surely die means you have lost your immortality. You are now not going to be sustained in terms of this contingent immortality you have. You've lost your immortality. You're going to die. And the being that led to this catastrophe, I'm going to put beneath the human world, certainly beneath the divine world. They are now Lord of the dead. This is a very consistent theological picture. Again, I don't know why this escapes so much attention, but it does. If you go to standard commentaries, you're not going to see much of this at all. And it's a shame. It's frankly a shame. So I hope that this creates a clear picture for you, and that it helps you digest the reading. If you've already done a lot of the reading, go back and maybe you can digest some more of it. But I hope that the issues are clear, the parallels are clear, and my thinking and method is clear as well. This is the end of the video.